Crimson Rivers, The Search. James wakes up. For the first time in his life, he experiences what it's like to wish he hadn't. There was a time when James understood that feeling from an outsider's perspective only, and it had made him ache then, seeing Sirius wake up and face instant regret that he had to. Sometimes Sirius would cry himself awake, and just cry and keep crying, and there was nothing James could do but sit with him and wait for the tears to pass. Hold him, rub his back, murmur soft words of encouragement and reassurance that James is quite sure Sirius never actually heard anyway. But he still said them. He always said them. Maybe it's selfish and irrational, but James is angry because Sirius isn't here to do that for him. Right now, at this moment, the only person James wants is his best friend, no one else. It's infuriating that Sirius isn't close by when James needs him, because James is always there when Sirius needs him. He knows logically that this isn't Sirius's fault, and yet he's still upset with him anyway. James wants to yell at him and shove him and yank on him until they collapse together so that James can curl up against him and weep. James misses him so much that it feels like being ripped in half. James has never known waking up to be a painful process, and now he doesn't think he'll ever forget. He can't even imagine a time when it won't hurt anymore. If one suffers consistently enough, that's all they know. Happiness only leaves behind memories, and those can fade away. Pain leaves behind scars, and those never really do. It doesn't help that he's waking up in physical pain as well. His leg fucking hurts. It's the first physical thing he becomes aware of, the fire and ache throbbing in his thigh. Looking down at where he's wrapped it with a torn-off portion of his shirt, he can see it brown, black, and red with dirt and blood. James averts his gaze because he doesn't even want to look at it. He knows it's bad, really fucking bad, in fact. He also knows it's a bigger problem than he's equipped to deal with. People know their bodies, and they know when something is wrong. James? Well, he can tell that this injury is bad. Not only does it hurt, but it's infecting him in other ways besides the sight of the wound. He's running hot, and he feels tired, and his head is fucking pounding something awful. The cold night alone, with no fire or blanket, surely didn't help, and now he's still trembling and sweating at the same time, which is a very bad sign. He knows that. He knows something is wrong. The thing is, he doesn't really care. That's the thing about waking up and wishing you hadn't. You don't really care about the possibility that you might fall asleep and never wake up again. James almost welcomes the thought. When it was Sirius dealing with that, nothing terrified him more. When it's him, it hardly seems to matter. Waking up comes with remembrance, despite the nightmares that plagued him through the night, giving him no reprieve even in sleep. Being awake is somehow worse. All of the events from the previous day seem more real when he's awake. Hodge, Vanity, Irene, Matthias. The weight of loss is nearly unbearable. It hurts more than his leg. It hurts more than the loneliness. It hurts more than anything he's ever felt in his life. There's so much guilt, so much anger, and he doesn't know what to do with it all. He can't rewind time and go back to stop it all from happening. He can't save them, any of them. What was the point of it all? They went to the cave, and for what? James made Vanity upset with him, and why? Regulus promised Vanity a blanket to survive the night, and she didn't even live to use it. So what's the point? If the arena has taught James anything, it's the reality of one pointless death right after the next. That's all it is here, really. Plans that don't work, choices that lead to loss. Every move they make is senseless because they were always going in one direction anyway, even from the start. James is furious with himself because what did he think was going to happen? The goal was to get Regulus home, wasn't it? He always knew everyone else was going to die, so what right does he have to be upset about it now? He avoided looking at it directly, unable to face it fully, and it ended with him here. It's the 6th day, there are 5 people remaining, and James does not care. He's awake, and he wishes he wasn't. He has the vial of Vespa's venom in hand, and he refuses to let it go. He's in pain, and he can't remember what it was like not to be. "Happy birthday, Hodge," James whispers, and he closes his eyes, letting himself drift off back to feverish, fitful sleep. Regulus jerks away at the sound of a bush rustling in the distance. His eyes snap open as he grips his dagger tight and flings himself up, heart racing, on edge in seconds. It's just a fox dashing out of the undergrowth. Exhaling, Regulus slowly lowers his dagger and waits for his heart to calm. He reaches out to shake James awake, unsure how he even managed to sleep through Regulus's panic, and then his hand hits the earth, because James isn't there. Regulus swivels his head and stares at the empty ground beside him, where James isn't. Oh, right. In seconds, Regulus is on his feet, rolling up his blanket to put back in his bag. He wastes no time in getting a move on, more clear-headed today than he was the one prior. He curses himself internally for being so rash in trying to find James last night, because now he has to backtrack. The rule change flickers through his mind, and the mere memory makes his heart jump, just like he did when he heard it. At that moment, a part of him dared to believe that James was alive, because that rule, well, he has no doubts that the people watching would love nothing more than to see James and Regulus make it home. Most people prefer happy endings to their love stories. Personally, Regulus doesn't believe in such things, but he's more than willing to use everyone else's naivety to his advantage. As for the others, Regulus isn't allowing himself to think about it. He wasn't as close to Vanity, Irene, and Matthias as James was, but that doesn't mean he's entirely unaffected by their deaths. But if losing Evan has taught him one thing, it's that giving into your grief inside this arena will either kill you or make you wish you were dead, both of which are recipes for disaster in a place where death is a real possibility. He'll deal with everything when they've won, when they've made it, when the arena is nothing but a memory. He can't do it now, can't sit down and let the weight of all of it settle on him, because he fears that it might crush him and make it nearly impossible to get back up. But here, they can't do that, not if they want to survive, and Regulus is determined to survive. He always has been from the very beginning, but now the feeling is much more potent. Maybe that's because he's going to be fighting for more than just himself. First, he has to fucking find James. Regulus is tired. He's running on very little sleep, and he's also dealing with his bruises and soreness from the fight with Bernice yesterday. But he doesn't let that stop him. He keeps going, heading back in the direction where he knows axes dragged James into the forest. When it was dark, Regulus really just picked a direction and went on blind hope that he would simply come across James. But, of course, it wouldn't be so simple. Now, in the daylight, when he reaches the part of the woods Axis was pulling James through, he can see he went the wrong way. See, when pulling a grown man through a forest, that tends to leave a trail, an obvious one. Taking a deep breath, Regulus begins to follow it. The next time James wakes up, he's thirsty. He can't remember the last time he had something to drink. Yesterday? When they all shared a meal together? Right? James wishes they all stayed in that cave. Maybe they could have done something else. Maybe they could have built traps instead of a bridge, and when the Death Eaters got too close, they would have been dealt with. They could have gone back to get the bear trap if it was still there. They could have built nets and just released Vespa to deal with whoever was caught. They could have done so many other things than what they actually did. What is it they say about hindsight? And then what? Regulus asks in his head. Right, that little niggling problem. No more Death Eaters, so what would come next in this dreadful scenario? Like Regulus said, they couldn't all play pacifists forever. Couldn't just settle in the cave and live out the rest of their days in perfect harmony. The game makers wouldn't have stood for it. They would have found a way to encourage violence and more death. Again, Regulus asks, and then what? I don't know, James rasps. I didn't know then, and I still don't know now. I don't have the answers. I'm sorry, but I never had the answers. All I was sure about was you. And now? Regulus asks. What now, James? Closing his eyes, James whispers, I don't know that either. I don't know anything. Regulus comes across a caved-in hole in the ground, like a tunnel. There's a dried puddle of blood around it, and mounds of dirt with claw marks, like someone was trying to desperately climb out of the hole. There are patches of hair as well, and when Regulus picks it up, he realizes it's Axis's. He blinks. Who the fuck tore out some of Axis's hair? All he can think is that Axis fell in this hole and got into a fight. A brutal one, by the looks of things. Was it James? That doesn't make much sense, honestly, because he's not entirely sure James would have been able to fight and get back out of the hole, especially if Axis survived. Then again, people do nearly impossible things when they're trying to survive, so maybe. After further investigation, Regulus can make out the signs of a fight, as well as a trail leading away. He thinks there's 3 sets of footprints, which means someone else was here. It comes to him suddenly, the memory of Juniper absolutely wrecking a fucking dummy in the training room every day. His eyebrows shoot up as he looks around slowly, and he can't help but be impressed, but mildly disturbed. From the looks of things, Juniper absolutely beat the fuck out of Axis. She still lost, though. Axis had a weapon as soon as James freed himself and got away, so they had the advantage in the end. Juniper was only 16 and quite a small girl, while Axis had at least 5 years on her and was more developed. Even with their small frame and stature, they managed to drag James this far into the forest with seemingly no issue. Went out fighting, didn't you? Regulus murmurs, swiveling his dagger through his fingers with a muted sigh. He looks at the dried spot of blood and grimaces. Axis has a lot to answer for. They'll answer, I promise you that. That's really the only solace Regulus can offer at this point. To all those that are gone, to all the families suffering loss, that's the only thing left they have to hope for. Vengeance. Regulus doesn't think he killed Quinn to avenge Evan. It was just instinct. An immediate reaction. She attacked him, so he responded and he killed her. He wonders if her family would like to see him dead for killing her. What about Avery's? What about Irene's? Do they blame him? He can't shake the guilt of Irene's death, even though she asked for it. Swallowing, Regulus forces the thoughts aside. No thinking about Irene or Quinn or Avery. No thinking about Evan, because that hurts the most, even now. The most important thing is getting to James, so he stands up. There's a clear path off to the side that Regulus is quite sure was James. For one thing, the trail is uneven, like whoever made it couldn't move steadily. For another, there's smears of blood on leaves and trees, as well as little trails of it that no doubt dribbled down his leg. Surely Axis could have followed this. Well, they might not have been able to if Juniper was keeping them busy in a hole. James, in his panic, probably didn't even know that Juniper was in there, because even dazed and injured, he would have tried to help her, no doubt. No, he must have wrenched the hook from his leg as soon as Axis fell in the hole, then scrambled to his feet and ran as much as he could on his bad leg. Regulus is assuming that, at some point, he found somewhere to hide where Axis couldn't find him. Regulus will. He'll search every nook and cranny of this forest if he has to, and so he starts doing just that, following the trail. Along the way, even though James likely wouldn't have been able to climb, Regulus never fails to look up. Evan would be proud of him for that, he thinks. The next time James comes to, he feels significantly worse than he did before. His leg hurts so bad that even breathing makes it worse. And he groans through clenched teeth, the one and only time he makes the mistake of gently prodding above where the hook went through his leg. Just a tiny push from his fingers makes his eyes sting with tears. Sirius, James whispers, breathing hard as he tilts his head back, blinking blearily at the roof of the cave. Please. He can't figure out why Sirius hasn't helped him yet. The only option that James can think of is that he can't afford the medicine, or the sponsors aren't willing to send it. But James is in so much pain that he can only shamefully resort to begging. He's so confused because he knows Sirius would do anything necessary to help him right now. Still, there's nothing. James can only sit there in a cold sweat, shivering and whimpering every other breath. It's agony. The sort of agony that makes him think he'd rather just cut his leg off than deal with this fucking pain. Shit, it hurts. Due to the discomfort, James can't get back to sleep. He's left with no choice but to feel it. There's also his thirst to deal with as well. His mouth is so dry. He's not hungry, at least. In fact, he doesn't think he could stomach anything at all. His appetite has completely vanished, despite the fact that he knows his body is showing signs of needing food for fuel. Yet the idea of eating makes him feel more nauseous than he already does. If James had a nightmare scenario, it would be exactly this. Between the loneliness, the grief, and the pain, he can't imagine anything worse to suffer. No, that's not true. James's brain is fucking awful, because it comes up with worse things easily. Regulus dead, his parents dead, Sirius dead. There's nothing in this world that could be worse than that, and James would suffer for eternity if it was what it took to keep them all alive and safe. Desperate not to think about that anymore, because he can feel an anxiety attack coming on just from the mere thought, he attempts to think about literally anything else. Of course, this sends him into a spiral about Vanity, Hodge, Irene, and Matthias. Even Willa and Juniper, Evan, Mulciber, Avery, Dylan. There are 19 people dead. James himself has killed 3 of them. How did he get here? What about Peter? He's still alive out there somewhere, isn't he? James remembers seeing him beaten and passed out on the ground, but after what happened with Vanity, he completely checked out of his surroundings and all that happened. James didn't come back to himself until he heard Regulus screaming his name. He doesn't even know what happened to Irene and Matthias. He can only hope they didn't suffer. So where's Peter? Is he all right? James hasn't heard a cannon, so he's still alive, but is he hurt? What happened to him? He never set the 3rd fire, so James is sure the Death Eaters found him before he managed to. Did they just figure out the plan and drag Peter, beaten and bloody, along with them? Why didn't they kill him? James is so grateful they didn't kill him. He still has to die. The Regulus in his head reminds him. For the first time in James's life, he wishes Regulus would shut up. Yes, obviously he knows that Peter has to fucking die, because the goal is still the same. Even now, the most important thing is getting Regulus home, which means 23 other people have to die, including Peter. Including James himself. It's a wild, freeing feeling to realize it, but it hits James that, at some point, he won't be dealing with all of this anymore. One way or another, he's going to be free of this fucking arena, even in death. Due to his pain, his suffering, his grief, and this heavy depression he can't shake off, James is so relieved by the thought that he nearly weeps. The sound of a soft chime makes James turn his head, drawn out of his admittedly morbid thoughts. He blinks, not entirely sure if he's hallucinating or if what he's seeing is actually real. A silver box comes floating through the mouth of the cave, drifting in with a tiny parachute holding it up. It bobs and weaves through the air, rocking further down, and James swallows as he watches it land gently next to him. It settles on the ground with a dull clatter. Carefully, James reaches over with a wince to snag the string of the parachute, dragging the box over to him. It's not too big, but it's not small either. The lid opens easily, and James blinks down at what's inside in surprise. There's a bottle of water and a syringe that has a small dosage of something in it. Okay, that's not what James was expecting, if he's honest, but all right. He shakes his head slightly and pulls the water out first, taking a few careful sips and letting his eyes flutter shut at the relief of it. Fuck, that's good. Clean and refreshing. He wants to guzzle it, but he doesn't know how long he'll be stuck here, so he plans to savor it. Hesitantly, James goes for the syringe next, eyebrows furrowed as he lifts it out. It's a very small dosage in a large syringe, just at the 20-milligram mark, and the needle is uncomfortably long. Whatever medicine it is, it's clear. With a frown, James peeks in the box again to find a white card at the bottom, and his hands tremble a bit when he lifts it out, because it's Sirius. A message from Sirius. Undeniable confirmation that he's watching, that he's close by, in his own way. James feels his heart jump as he reads it. In the vein in your arm, for the pain. I'm here. That's it. That's all it says, and James still starts crying anyway. He nearly drops the syringe, but fumbles to catch it and sit it aside carefully. And then he covers his face with both hands and just fucking weeps. He can't help it. I miss you, James chokes out, dropping his hands, because more than the pain, that's what gets to him the most. Sirius can fix the pain, and he can't really fix that he's not here for James to reach out and touch, to talk to, but those two words at the end meant something in him, at least a little. I'm here. He's not, actually, but James knows what he means. He's watching. He's listening. He's here for James as much as he can be from where he really is. I miss you so much, Sirius. Of course, there's no reply. But James can close his eyes and picture Sirius in his mind. All their shared looks and their inside jokes. The way they can practically read each other's minds just from meeting one another's eyes. How they can have entire discussions through a simple touch. He can still hear the last thing Sirius ever said to him. A steady source of comfort, even now. Thank you, James breathes out, his hand shaking as he reaches to grab the syringe again. James has absolutely no idea how to do this, really, but he's gotten blood drawn before, so he tries to copy how that went. He eases one arm out of his coat and squints down at the bend of his elbow. Well, either it works or it doesn't. With care, James makes a fist and lines up the needle with his vein, then pushes in until he feels like it's enough, and then slowly presses the plunger down. There is a small dot of blood when he pulls the needle out and sits the syringe aside, which he wipes away. He blinks, but doesn't feel different. Okay, so maybe he fucked that up. That's on him. At least Sirius tried, and really, James is just grateful to have heard from him. And bonus, there's water. James eases his way back into his coat, zipping it back up and slipping the vial in his pocket, then reaches for the water. He sips on that slowly, dropping the syringe in the box and setting it aside, keeping the card in hand as he runs his thumb over it with reverence. He touches it like it's a treasure. He's still looking at it, lost in doing that for several minutes, when he suddenly becomes aware of the lack of pain. It makes him blink and lift his head, mildly startled by the sensation, because fuck, he didn't realize how desperately he needed that until he got it. Oh, that's really good. Oh shit, James whispers, his lips parting on a soft sigh as the medicine really kicks in, and he goes from not only having no pain to feeling absurdly amazing, like he's floating, like he's weightless, like he's made of light. James opens his eyes and tips his head back, watching the ceiling of the cave swirl above him, quite literally seeing stars. Oh, Sirius. James loves Sirius. That's his best friend. The best fucking friend anyone could ask for. The best. You're the best. Oh, I love you so much, James mumbles, breathlessly, his head lolling from side to side as he giggles and lets his eyes slip shut. Sirius isn't here to reply, but James easily knows what his response would be. Sirius loves him too. There's no doubt in James's mind, especially now. When James falls asleep again, he does so feeling loved. Also, very high. Regulus is starting to get worried. It's past midday now, starting to creep closer to evening, and he refuses not to find James before nightfall. He's out here somewhere, no way to make a fire, no blanket, no food, and no water. Well, no, maybe that's not true. Maybe Sirius has sent him something, because Regulus knows deep down in his bones that Sirius will not let James die, no matter what it takes, especially not with a rule change. Still, Regulus would feel better actually seeing that James is well for himself. Following the trail only got him so far. James, at some point, must have stopped to wrap his leg or something, because the blood trail eventually ended, even when the less obvious signs of someone passing through didn't. The broken twigs, the random footprint, things such as that. Unfortunately, the trail eventually broke out into a clearing, and that's no doubt where Axis lost James, because that's where Regulus does too. He can't pick a trail back up, so now he's just wandering around the area, looking for any place James could have hid. So far, he's found nothing. Regulus keeps an eye out for Axis, in case they've decided to come looking for James again, but he sincerely doubts that's going to be the first thing on their mind. No, he'd bet a lot on the chances that Axis is out there looking to meet up with Bernice again. Safety in numbers, of course. The last two remaining Death Eaters, yeah, they'll be together, no doubt. Peter is a wild card. Regulus wouldn't have assumed that Peter would work with the Death Eaters before the announcement, but Bernice is from his district. If they survive, they can go home, no different from James and Regulus knows just how enticing the idea of that is. Without that rule change, Regulus won't even consider the possibility that Peter might be a future problem. In fact, he would dare to think that Peter would be helping him and James in the end. Now, he's not so sure. Heaving a sigh, Regulus carefully skids down an incline and mutters under his breath, "James, where are you?" Of course, there is no reply, so Regulus can only continue to make his way in circles, carefully pushing the parameter as he looks. Everywhere, basically. He loses more daylight to this and grows frustrated, genuinely worrying he's not going to find James before tonight, at least until he finds a footprint. Regulus has been careful, literally observing everything with keen eyes, so he doesn't miss the tread in the dirt. The sight of it makes his heart jump, because there's a 1 in 4 chance of that being James, and he's quite sure James is in the area. Slowly, he looks up and swivels his head, taking everything in around him as he goes in the direction the footprint was pointing towards. Less than 5 minutes later, Regulus sees a mound off to the side that looks promising, and he climbs his way up the incline. When he reaches the peak, he doesn't see much at all, not at first. But there, barely even noticeable, tucked behind a cluster of trees, there is just the tiniest sliver of a cave that he can only just make out, even with how hard he's looking. Regulus drops down over the side of the mound and moves forward, dagger in hand. It's quiet outside, excluding the creak of the trees and the gentle sound of wildlife, particularly songbirds that whistle at one another. When he was young, he used to wonder what they talked about. No sound comes from the cave, and the entrance is so small that he has to duck down and slowly ease his way inside, grateful when the roof immediately lifts as he goes further in and lets himself straighten up. It's dim inside, but the sunlight pours in from behind him, and it feels like an electric shock runs through him the moment he sees James. He's there. He's actually there. "James!" Regulus blurts out, moving forward immediately, gripped with mild panic when James doesn't respond, even though he's visibly breathing. He looks rough, and the wrap around his leg has bloodstains. There's a white card held in his limp grip, and Regulus can see a sponsor box on the other side of him, by his hip. Regulus sits his dagger down and reaches out to cup James's cheeks, turning his head and lightly tapping one of them. "James, hey, James, wake up! James!" It takes another minute and a rougher smack, but James's eyes do eventually flutter open. He's hot to the touch, a bit sweaty, and his eyes are glazed where they're held only half open. He breaks out into a smile and mumbles, "Sirius, you're here. You said you were. You said—" Regulus blinks. James has never, not once in his life, under any circumstances, mistaken Regulus for Sirius. "What? Hey, look at me, James, it's Regulus." "Regulus," James whispers, his eyebrows tugging together, but the lucidity in his eyes are non-existent. "Sirius, I promise. I'm gonna do it. I'll get him home, okay? I'll make sure Regulus gets home, whatever it takes." It feels like Regulus's entire body goes cold. His hands slip off James's face, and he rocks back, staring at him as his ears ring. Regulus doesn't breathe for a long moment. Can't manage it. He just stares at James, who blinks slowly and looks so sincere that it's painful. No. No. That's not... No. No. It's not true. That's not possible. Regulus refuses to. No. He shakes his head, because there's no fucking way. James said he would make it home. He said that, didn't he? He said... All he ever said was that he would do what he needed to do. Regulus assumed that meant fighting to get home, because that's the logical conclusion, for fuck's sake. The idea that James meant the chance that this whole time he's been... No fucking chance. No, Regulus doesn't believe that. He refuses to even entertain the thought, because it is the single most ridiculous display of stupidity that he could think of, and legitimately never even thought of it, because it's that foolish. Regulus knows James is a fucking idiot, but there's no way he would be this devastatingly obtuse and brainless. Absolutely not. Clenching his jaw, Regulus reaches out to grab the white card from James's slack fingers. James makes a fussy sound and tries to grab it back, but Regulus snatches it away and swats James on the back of his hand, which makes him let out a soft, sad sound like a whirring machine slowly losing power. He looks at Regulus with big eyes full of betrayal. "Sirius, that's mine," James murmurs petulantly. Regulus ignores him and glances at the card, reading it, and then he frowns and leans over James's lap to peer into the box. He wrenches back and scowls up at the ceiling. "You fucking drugged him? Are you insane? He's already vulnerable as it is, and now he's high as a kite. You send him something for the pain, but nothing to actually heal him." "Who are you yelling at?" James asks, trying to stealthily snag the card from Regulus's fingers. "I don't think anyone's here." "Oh, just..." Regulus huffs and flicks the card at James, who beams as soon as he has it in his hands again. Shaking his head, Regulus once again leans over James's lap to grab the water bottle, then takes his bag off, digging through it to find the cloth. Once he has it, he focuses on James, who has his eyes closed, as he smiles dopily and drags the edge of the card over his cheek. "James." "I'm going to take a look at your leg, all right?" "It might hurt." James cracks open one eye and says, "You'll never hurt me, Sirius." "Right," Regulus replies flatly, taking a deep breath before slowly letting it out. He huffs out a bitter laugh, shaking his head as he scoots down to James's leg. "Brilliant. I wasn't aware this entire experience could get worse, and yet here we are. James, do me a favor and just don't talk to me." "But I miss you," James tells him. Regulus sighs. James is going to have to reevaluate his ironclad certainty that Sirius would never hurt him, because Sirius is hurting him. He's doing something to James's leg that hurts a lot, and also Sirius is suddenly being so mean to him. He's never done that before. "You're being really mean," James announces, just in case he doesn't realize he's doing it. Sirius rolls his eyes, but like in a mean way, not like him at all. It's really attractive. "Well, if you'd hold still..." "I'm trying, but it hurts." "I did tell you that I would. Stop whining." "When did you start being so rude?" James sputters, flinching when Sirius does another painful thing to his leg. Oh, what is he doing? James really hopes he stops soon. "When did you turn into a big baby?" Sirius shoots back. James huffs a weak laugh and leans his head back, gazing at Sirius with a lopsided smile. "Regulus says that to me, you know? He called me baby once, in a cute way. Isn't that cute? Well, you might not think so, but it was really cute. He's really cute. You have to. You need to be here so he can see you. Don't leave until he sees you. He probably won't show it, but he misses you as much as you miss him." "Shut up, I do not," Sirius grumbles. "Sirius, it's me," James reminds him, exasperated. "I know you miss him. Nothing wrong with that, you know. He's your little brother. It only makes sense. I miss him too. I mean, in a very different way, but you get my point. I'm literally begging you to stop opening your mouth and letting out relentless stupidity," Sirius says, his voice strained. "That's really mean." James mumbles. Sirius sighs. Yes, you've mentioned. You know who else is really mean to me? Speaking of your brother, James says with a wistful sigh. Sirius huffs a soft laugh, and James briefly wonders when he started being so quiet. But, it's okay when he does. Actually, I really enjoy it when he does it, because then at least he's paying attention to me, not ignoring me. That's pathetic, isn't it? Yes, Sirius confirms bluntly. He is nice, though, sometimes. Like, he gave me a parting gift. Not here in the arena, I mean, and it was... James cuts off with a sputter, because Sirius clamps a firm hand over his mouth, making it impossible to continue. Why don't you keep that to yourself, yeah? Sirius asks, then coughs and slowly drags his hand away. James blinks at him, confused, and Sirius shakes his head. That's really no one's business but those involved, James. James stares at him incredulously. But I tell you everything. Seriously? Sirius breathes out, as if disgusted. He's my brother. You have to draw the line somewhere. Well, I didn't tell you. I wasn't going to, because I was coming here, and now I'm guilty about it. James pauses, then purses his lips. Actually, not guilty about doing it, just guilty about not telling you, or just actively choosing not to tell you. We didn't do anything, really. Well, okay, James, Sirius cuts in sharply, and James blinks at him, shutting his mouth slowly. That's enough. Let's never talk about it, yeah? I really don't want to talk about it. You do have a point about him being your brother. You're not even going to want the details, James says, giving Sirius a significant look. Just as long as you get the point that there are details to give, because something happened. Sirius scoffs and mutters, barely anything happened, but okay. He heaves a sigh and shakes his head when he looks up and finds James frowning at him. No more talking about Regulus, all right? But I miss him too, James mumbles. Oh, for fuck's sake, Sirius declares in exasperation. Then he does another painful thing that makes James whine and try to squirm away from it. Fuck, James rasps out. Sirius, if you do that again, I swear You'll what? Sirius asks sarcastically. What exactly can you do at the moment, James? Nothing. So shut up and stop moving. I'm almost through with cleaning it. It's really bad. It's infected, which is... Sirius? James murmurs, his anger evaporating as he watches Sirius swallow, his face grim. He looks upset, and James can't stand by and do nothing about that. Hey, it's fine. It's really not, Sirius rasps, then tips his head back. Do you see this? I can't do anything about it. He needs help. Drugging him doesn't fix him. Can you fucking hell, what are you waiting for? James looks up, but he only sees the top of his cave. He leans in and murmurs, Sirius, who are you talking to? I promise, it's just a hallucination. It's not real. What? Sirius shoots him a strange look, but he seems ultimately distracted as he leans back and unzips his coat. He takes his dagger. Wait, is that... How did you get Regulus's dagger? James asks. Sirius ignores him, which is unlike him and extremely upsetting in every way, but he is busy, to be fair. He's slicing off the bottom part of his shirt all the way around, big enough that the scar on his side shows. Wait, when did he get a scar on his side? He has a scar on his stomach? And many others elsewhere, but not on his side. James snaps his hand out and snatches Sirius's shirt up further, looking for the scar he knows is there, but it's gone. Confused, he lifts his gaze to find Sirius looking annoyed as he swats James's hand away and pushes his shirt back down. It doesn't fall all the way, due to the portion he cut all the way around. It takes a moment, but James realizes that Sirius's hair is shorter than it's supposed to be. He's not right. There's something off. James blinks, then blinks harder, reaching out again to gently pat the side of Sirius's head, his hair, and he flicks his gaze up to meet James's eyes, and oh, that's not Sirius. Those aren't Sirius's eyes. Despite the similarities, nearly the same exact shape and eye color, those eyes belong to only one person. The whole world warps in and out of focus, but there he is, coming through clear as a bell. Regulus. Oh, hey, James murmurs. You were never Sirius. He was never here. Regulus shakes his head, and for a moment he almost looks apologetic, which may have something to do with the fact that James is utterly heartbroken that his best friend isn't here right now. No, James. I think I'm really high, James says solemnly. Yeah, but I'm sure you're coming down, or starting to, at least, Regulus murmurs. Try to hold still for me, would you? I'm wrapping your leg again. Okay, James mumbles. Sirius isn't here. He was never here. Oh, James misses him. But Regulus is here, isn't he? Unless he's a hallucination of some sort. At this point, James wouldn't put anything out of the realm of possibility. These are some very, very good drugs. They even help make it hurt a lot less than it would without them when Regulus wraps his leg again firmly. It does hurt, but it's not excruciating, unbearable agony that makes him scream. At most, it makes him groan and curl forward, grinding his teeth through the pain, and then it passes like a wave, breaking along the shore, receding out again, when the magical medicine finally takes over once more. There, I'm done torturing you for now. You're fine. You'll be fine, Regulus tells him gently. Just rest for now. Sleep it off, all right? You came and found me, James whispers, gazing at him through a haze, so tired and still confused, but the idea that Regulus would come for him makes him inordinately happy. Of course I did, Regulus whispers back. What was Sirius thinking? Drugging James. In the middle of the fucking Hunger Games. That might be the most idiotic thing Regulus has ever known his brother to do. And this is Sirius he's talking about. So that says a lot. Sirius once flipped a cigarette in the air and tried to catch it with his mouth, while it was lit, and kept doing it until he could actually consistently manage it, no matter how much it burned him. Though, in fairness, he can still do that trick to this day. And, in fairness to this, Sirius does come with a knowledge of everyone's position in the arena, which reassures Regulus a bit, because he knows Sirius would never put James at such risk under the influence, while others are nearby. In any case, James's injury is really bad, so Regulus doesn't doubt that James was in a lot of pain. There's no way Sirius could ignore that and do nothing about it. The only thing Regulus doesn't understand is why Sirius hasn't sent medicine to heal him. Not just take his pain away, but properly fix him. Some of the salve they had before would go a long way right now, surely. Regulus knows it has to be very fucking expensive, but Sirius is Sirius. If anyone can get it done, it's him, so why hasn't he yet? James isn't doing well. He's been sleeping fitfully for hours now, the medicine slowly wearing off over time. He still hasn't woken up, thankfully, but he's been mumbling and groaning in his sleep, his brow furrowed and his face twisted with pain. Despite how sweaty he is, he's trembling like he's cold, and he clearly has a fever. The infection has set in. Frankly, Regulus isn't entirely sure what to do. He has nothing to heal James, and from what he learned in the training room, James could easily die in as little as 3 days if sepsis sets in, depending on the severity of his wound. It's been 24 hours since he got the injury by this point, so it's a real issue. Regulus considers his options. He'll do what it takes to get James home with him, because if he dies from infection when they're this close to the finish line, Regulus will tear his fucking hair out and probably never forgive himself, or James, or even Sirius. That's not an option. Regulus refuses to let that happen, which means he either has to find some way to heal James, or he has to figure out some way to get James home so he can be healed within the next 2 days. Honestly, Regulus was already prepared to go out and kill everyone before, so if that's what it comes to, yeah, he can do that. It's just Bernice, Axes, and Peter. They all could be in one group, or all separate, or it could be 2 of them with one alone. Either way, Regulus is pretty sure he can do it. He has his dagger and James's hatchet. If he's quick about it and catches them off guard, maybe fights through the fear and climbs the tree to attack from up high. It's getting late now, though. Not dark just yet, but the sun is starting to set. Regulus will have to wait until tomorrow. For now, he has to stay here and make sure James doesn't die throughout the night. But after that, Regulus will handle it. Regulus goes out with James's water bottle and his own water canister to go back to the closest stream he passed on his way here. It's a small one, and it's about 20 minutes away, so it's nearly an hour round trip. He stops to gather wood and kindling to start a small fire in the cave along the way. Though he's admittedly antsy about being this far away from James when he's so vulnerable. Even without the drugs, he's at risk. He can't move or fight. When Regulus makes it back, James is fine. In fact, he's finally awake, and he's clearly lucid, because he sucks in a sharp breath as soon as Regulus walks in with his hands full. "Regulus," James breathes out. Regulus ignores him and crouches down in front of his legs, where they stick straight out, slowly setting up the fire for them, which he has no matches to light it with. He'll have to do it by hand. Okay, so now he regrets tossing all the supplies in a fit of dramatics and murderous rage. He could have at least replaced his matches, but in his defense, he wasn't really in the best place at the time, mentally speaking. After he sits the water down and sets up the fire to burn later, Regulus finally looks up and stares at James, who's watching him closely. There's something different about him that wasn't there under the influence of drugs. Sure, there's pain in his expression from his wound, but what really comes through is the sorrow in his eyes and the grief that carves into every angle of his face. What's more worrying than all of that is the complete lack of spark that James Potter has always carried with him for as long as Regulus has known him. Nothing has ever managed to smother that spark, because James is never afraid to be the one who has hope. James won't hesitate to try and find the silver lining. James believes in purpose and finding meaning in everything, and he does not give up. So seeing him like this makes Regulus' heart drop. "James," Regulus murmurs, shifting to the side to scoot closer to James and scan his face with a frown. "You're here," James says, and his voice cracks. It's the voice crack that gets to Regulus really. He can't help it. Just hearing it causes something to crack within him, and it's immediately obvious that James is very fragile right now. He needs to be handled with caution. "Yes, I'm here." James swallows thickly and reaches for him, so Regulus goes without complaint, closing the distance so James doesn't have to fold forward too far just to wrap his arms around him and bury his face in Regulus's shoulder. Regulus hugs him back, squeezing his eyes shut the moment he hears James choke out a muffled sob against him. He's shaking. It's very hard, suddenly, not to break down and weep right along with him. There's so much to cry about. Blood behind his eyelids, stained on his hands, in his mouth, screams, the sound of cannons, death, death, so much death. Regulus blinks harshly and rolls his jaw, releasing a deep, shuddering breath. James is clinging to him tight, like he doesn't want to let go, but his leg also doesn't really give him much of a choice in the matter. He makes a low, pained noise and draws back with tear tracks on his face. "I've been here for a while now," Regulus murmurs, his fingers quite literally itching with the need to wipe the tears away until he gives in and just does it. James lets him, leaning forward into his palm. "Do you remember?" "No," James says, eyebrows furrowed. "Sirius sent me drugs. It gave me weird dreams about him and you, like you were him, but he was really hazy around the edges, so I couldn't tell, and then you transformed back into yourself. It was really strange, Reg. Very confusing. I can't remember it all, but I can safely say I wasn't in as much pain, so there's that." Regulus decides now isn't the best time to mention that those weren't exactly dreams, because James was very awake and doing all of that in real time. He clears his throat. "And now? How much pain are you in now?" "I cleaned and redressed the wound, but it's not looking good, James." "Doesn't feel good either," James mumbles wearily, glancing down at his leg, then immediately looking away from it. "I'll be fine, probably. Maybe not. Doesn't really matter, does it?" "What is that supposed to mean?" Regulus asks sharply, a frisson of alarm surging through him. "Of course it matters. I could fucking kill you." James just stares at him, then huffs a humorless laugh, and nods like he's so very exhausted. Right, well, don't act like that's not helpful for you in the long run. One last person between you and home, yeah? What? Regulus snaps. Fuck you, James. If you think I'm not going to do everything to get you home with me, then you... What? James cuts in, blinking at him. Regulus pauses, then frowns. The announcement. Did you hear the announcement? What announcement? James asks, visibly confused. Oh, Regulus breathes out, deflating a little as he stares at James in horror. He's wondered, really, why James didn't have that spark, especially with the rule change, even despite the grief and pain he's suffering, because if James knew he could get home and see his parents again, see Sirius again, and bring Regulus home with him, he wouldn't give up, wouldn't even dream of it. There's been a rule change. You must have missed it, but 2 people of the same district can be victors. We can go home, James, both of us. James's head tips to the side as his face crumbles, tears instantly filling his eyes as he rasps. No, are you, please don't be joking, Regulus, if you're just, no, I swear, I'm not, it's real, I promise, Regulus says quickly, hushed, and he reaches out to grab James's hands and squeeze them, like maybe that will get the point across better. James's lip is trembling, and he chokes out a harsh breath as he grips Regulus's hand tight. We can make it, me and you. Oh, fuck, shit, James whispers, his head ducking forward as he starts crying all over again. Big, deep, gasping sobs. He laughs, too, like a man discovering hope for the very first time. Like someone lost in the desert stumbling across a source of water. Like that first flicker of flame in the deep dark of the freezing Arctic, finally catching to provide warmth. I know, Regulus murmurs, breathless, and he can't stop himself from leaning in to press his face against James's shoulder, feeling the same relief as him. We can go home, James croaks, lifting his head. Regulus lifts his too, and their faces are really close together, so he can see in perfect clarity that James's spark is back. It's there, in his eyes, and Regulus's heart flutters at the sight. He swallows and leans away. Yeah, James, we can go home. Sirius heaves a sigh, reaching up to rub at his temple, the headache really setting in. Regulus, you emotionally constipated little shit, he thinks. He can't believe he's even upset about this right now, but what the fuck was that? Not only did Regulus completely bypass any intimacy or hint of past intimacy with James, yeah, Sirius can take a wild guess of what something James was talking about happening between them, though he doesn't really want to, but Regulus also just made that the least romantic reunion in history. A hug? That's all he could do? Not even another stupid forehead kiss or something. Come the fuck on! Regulus is smarter than this. He should be able to work out what the people want. The people, as it were, are not very happy at the moment. In fact, everyone is very disappointed that Regulus didn't collapse into James's arms and immediately confess his undying love. Of course, Sirius knows that Regulus would literally never do that, but the people don't. They want what they want, and there won't be any help given to James until they get it. Frankly, Sirius is very fucking tired and officially at the end of his rope. He told Slughorn that the push Regulus needed was hope, and he honestly thought that would work.
Not because Regulus actually hopes for a future with James,
but because he's smart enough to work out that everyone really wants to see their romance enough that they care about a happy ending, which he could use to his advantage. He could be using it to his advantage right now. And look, Sirius doesn't particularly want Regulus to be in this position where he's forced into doing these things that he doesn't want to. In fact, Sirius fucking hates this. It makes him want to tuck Regulus behind him and keep him safe and out of sight as he shouts at anyone who dares to demand anything from him. The last thing Sirius wants is for Regulus to end up like him. But in the same breath, James's survival depends on it. In situations as dire as this, there is no room to be unwilling to do something it takes to survive. If Regulus doesn't give them what they want, he'll be punished for it. Not only him, but James too. The worst part is, Sirius doesn't think that Regulus isn't willing to do this. He's pretty sure Regulus would just suck it up and do what it takes. If only he knew. So, as much as Sirius hates it, he's going to have to figure out a way to tell him, because Regulus needs to know, because Regulus has to do this if he wants them both to survive. Sighing, Sirius swivels on the spot, slaps on a broad smile, and crosses the room while cooing, "Joffrey, darling, I think it's time I take you up on your offer."